Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Today is March 29th, 2022. It's a little bit after 1 o'clock. There's still a few folks joining us. We're here for Maryland Public Service Commission, PC54, Montgomery County Community Choice Pilot Program. We're going to start off today. I'm going to see if Mr. Trout wants to go over his straw man that he submitted. If you want to have comments, that's great. If you don't want to have comments, that's great. And then we're going to turn to staff. And before the end of the day today, we're going to talk about where we're going from here. I believe that's it. Mr. Trout, did you want to have some comments?
I just wanted to say that I'm
not hearing you. I'm not sure if that's me or.
Okay, I do not have. I have the microphone turned on. Can anybody else hear me?
Jeff, we can hear you.
We can hear you, Jeff. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So what we submitted at the end of last week represents the efforts of both Potomac Edison and Montgomery County. What we submitted at the end of last week represents I don't know what to do about the echo. The straw proposals from both Potomac Edison and Montgomery County, we did solicit feedback, or Potomac Edison did solicit feedback from the Exelon utilities, and they can certainly explain their position, but I think the concept in broad strokes works for them as well. And it is designed to be easily implementable and inexpensive. And beyond that, I'd be happy to discuss any or all aspects of it. I would invite our subject matter experts and the representatives of the county to speak as well in response to any questions we get. Is someone speaking?
No. Stan Edwards is unmuted, and so is Robbie Atkins. Did either of you have something to say?
I was just going to say that Montgomery County greatly appreciates Jeff's work on this. He put the first concept together, and we were happy to work with him to develop it further. And so we appreciate PE's efforts.
Yeah, I think for PHI and for BG&E, we are as well, with one caveat. As far as the switching in 1 to 2 days, that's not how it currently works in our system. So it would be a 3-day switch per the rules as they are today. So the customer would be on SOS for 3 days, not 1 or 2. Unless we have to, and then that would be a cost for us to change the process within our systems.
Okay, well, that would work for Potomac Edison because, again, the object was to not have to redesign the existing systems, but
okay,
I would want the county's input on that, and for that matter, other stakeholders as well.
Yeah, we saw the 1 to 2 days, and that just gave us, pause for concern because that's not how it works today. So, okay.
Yeah, I think that's fine. There are scenarios in that proposal that envision longer than that, so that's fine.
Okay, so let's assume we make that correction to the straw man.
Jeff, could you or one of your folks talk about the range of the amount of time that would happen for customers to stay on SOS based on I guess maybe weekends and holidays playing into that. And I had another question to sort of follow up on how this is going to interact with the seamless move stuff. But could you first maybe give us a feel for how long that range is?
I'm going to ask Val or one of our subject matter experts to speak to that.
Yeah, to clarify that, it's business days, not calendar days.
Yeah, ours would be business days. Was that?
Yeah. So it's three business days.
Yeah. Our time is a little bit longer too, or potentially for move-in, it would be like a next day kind of thing. But if they're switching from another supplier, I think is where you get into the extra day or two. So we could be a little bit longer too. I think that we're pretty similar on that.
I think, and I don't want to speak for the county, so Stan, if you want to take over this point as soon as I drop it. I think the scenarios where it's possible for a customer to stay on SOS for some longer period of time would be a scenario where the county was, where the CCA was interacting with the new customer, and the CCA, for its business reasons associated with those interactions or otherwise, chose to delay sending us the EDI notice of the ad. That's where a customer would potentially stay on longer than a few days. Am I understanding that right, Stan?
Yes, Jeff, that's correct.
So Phil, does that answer your first question?
So we're talking about, and I see that there's a couple hands up, so I don't want to step on anybody here. It looks like on the short end, a customer will be on SOS for at least 3 business days. And on the long end, it could be maybe up to a week or so. I guess maybe if we could walk through kind of both of those scenarios so we understand. And that, that's a little bit important, because the other question I was going to follow that with is, does this mean that the customer's bill, when they get it, will show a billing for SOS at the SOS rates during that time period and billing for the CCA rates? Is that a good presumption?
Yes, I'll go to the latter part of your question, Phil, because I do know the answer to that. The answer to your question there is yes, and it's similar. It's a similar situation to what will happen for customers when they first switch to the CCA, when the CCA first gets up and running. Unless everybody switches exactly on a billing cycle, they're going to have charges for both on their bill.
Okay, I have a couple of process questions, and I do want to ask about seamless move, but I see Bill Fields has had his hand up for a while, so I'll defer to his question, then I'll come back.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
All right, that's good. My question was probably mostly for Pepco. We're talking about new customers, that come into the service territory after this is all up and running. Can you tell us, based on history, how many customers we're talking about? I'm really just trying to get a sense of how much load this is going to add to SOS.
Yeah, now that information I do not have. It would work the way that it does today. When a brand new customer signs up for new service, they're on SOS until they switch to a third-party supplier. But as far as
I guess I'm really just asking how many new customers do you get a year?
Bill, this is Tyler Wolverton from Pepco. I think our customer growth the last 5 or 10 years on the residential side has been in the 5%, maybe a little less, give or take. So if we have 500,000 residential customers or so, and half of those are Montgomery County, take 1% of that and divide it by 12 months.
Well, is that 1% a net number?
Is that a what? Sorry.
Is it a net number? Because I'm thinking like, somebody moves out and somebody moves in. That's not net growth. That would be zero.
You're fading in and out, Bill.
Sure. Oh, maybe this will work a
Yeah,
little
Bill,
better.
I think I got your question. That is not the number of move-in and move-outs each month. I thought you were asking about additional customers on the system.
Well, I was trying to figure out. I mean, I think I am asking for the number of move-ins, because this is going to mean that all of the move-ins in Montgomery County are going to land on SOS for a few days, and I wanted to understand how many customers that's going to be for SOS,
Gotcha.
and derivatively, their wholesale suppliers, whether this is any kind of material, burden that's being put on SOS that could influence, the pricing we see from wholesale suppliers. I mean, I don't think it is, but I'd like to know the numbers so we can understand it.
So I can give you one more data point. And again, this is just me kind of off the cuff, but I did recently have to look at this. In the district where we have about 200,000, 250,000 residential customers, so it's a similar size to Montgomery County, we have about 10,000 move-ins per month. Now, that doesn't mean we have 10,000 new customers. It means it's a person moving from one part of the city to another part. So.
That gives me some pause as to whether, wholesale suppliers would perceive this as I mean, I guess that's going to be a 10,000 sort of a steady state, or, people are going to be moving in through all the way through the month.
Right. But that's how it works today.
Well, but the 10,000 move-ins, only a fraction of those go off to retail suppliers. I mean, yeah, they're all part of SOS.
Right.
This is going to be Montgomery County move-ins being, added to the, remaining SOS. And I'm trying to get a sense of how much is being added into what would be the remaining SOS aside from these move-ins.
Hey, Dee Dee, I'm on another phone. Hold on 1 second.
Well, I guess I raised that as a concern that I think we should think about a little bit, and we'll try to, if like I said, particularly if Pepco could give us some more information on how many move-ins they get per month, and we can think a little bit about whether that is a material impact on SOS.
So, Bill, this is Jeff Trout, and I think the new customers will not be an addition at all to what's currently happening with SOS, because what happens now is a new customer starts out on SOS. But the change is going to be when we get the drop from the county. And that's the change that we're planning for anyway. So
I'm thinking of, we're past the startup at steady state. There's, the way I'm thinking of it is there's two ways that this can go. One is that the new customer immediately goes to Montgomery County. The other way is the customer, and this is going to be a Montgomery County customer, spends a few days on SOS, which is, primarily at this point will primarily be a service for Prince George's County customers. And so I'm trying to get a sense of whether, option two, which is your proposal here, that they spend a few days on SOS, whether that puts any kind of material impact on SOS.
Okay.
And I think it's primarily a concern for PEPCO, probably with BGE and PE, the number is going to be a lot less.
Yeah, I think the answer is no, but I'm going to let the people who can do the math in their head and also talk about the SOS aspects of it speak.
Hey, Bill, this is David Bloom with BGE, manager in the energy acquisition group. And as we've indicated before, because of the small number of customers in our service territory in Montgomery County, an INC would not be triggered, generally speaking, from the community choice energy program. And in this instance, with these new move-in customers, then it would follow that we would not see an impact to other SOS customers from an INC using this proposal. I know the PHI team is double checking on the numbers to find out exactly whether or not an INC could hypothetically be triggered. It does, like Jeff Trout, I think, just mentioned. I do think it's a low likelihood, but I know the other team is checking to get confirmation.
Well, I'm not sure that that's the only question, is whether it creates an INC or not. But I guess it would be, I'd still let you, I think it would be useful to know what level of load we're talking about. And I suppose if it's if it's going to be a steady level of load throughout the month and throughout the year, maybe it's not a concern because of that. Because it's just, it makes SOS a little bit bigger, but as long as it's, a steady increase, then, it should be something that shouldn't cause a problem for the wholesale suppliers.
Leah Gibbons also has her hand raised.
Hey, thank you, Judge. I just had a quick question. So, I mean, I don't have a particular position on this proposal. I think if the county's good, that seems fine. I guess my question really is, what happens if a customer shops and enrolls with a supplier within that 1 to 3 day window? Right. So to me, there's like a couple of things to just think about. I mean, will the utility reject that enrollment request that comes through while that account is pending a service start? And if not, and it's accepted, then how does that account get scrubbed from the list that's posted to the FTP site? So I guess that's more than one question. It's two questions.
So, Leah, this is Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
If we get an ad from a supplier before the customer's service start date, Val, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's going to be treated the same way as if we got one now under shopping. And if we get an ad from them on or after the service start date, it would again be treated the same way as it's treated now. They would go to the supplier. Val, if we get an ad for a customer from a supplier before the service start date, doesn't that get rejected?
Yes.
Okay, so the supplier then would have to send us another EDI transaction on or after the start date in order to get that customer enrolled correctly with them. But
Right.
that's
That's right, Jeff.
exactly the same that's exactly the process we have now.
Yep.
Valerie,
What
could you go into that a little bit further? So if the CCA sends an enrollment after receiving the information, I guess by downloading it from the FTP site, they actually have to send that enrollment after the customer starts service or it gets rejected. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or
So
the same day they start service.
So if they start the same day, will that enrollment be effective that day or be effective the next day?
The next day. Yeah.
So can they send it the day before so that it's synchronous with the start of service?
No. The system would still reject it.
I mean, so
It has to be the same day or after.
you're going to provide them with a valid account number with the information you're allowing them to download?
Yeah.
It'll be a pending account number, so they'll have the pending account.
Yeah, we'd give them the customer number and whatever other information they need. I think we talked about using the interested customer list kind of formatting, which should generally have everything.
So
So that, I mean, that actually begs a different question for me. I mean, so it sounds like if I heard you all right, that whether it's the CCA submitting the enrollment with the service on the service start date or after, or a retail supplier submitting an enroll on or after the service start date, you know, neither one is going to be accepted prior to service start. So I think I get that piece. So there's sort of equity there. I guess my next question then is, how do you determine last in? Because, you know, in the case of the CCA, this is a default choice, right? So the customer hasn't really opted out to do anything. But in the case of a supplier enrollment, that is an affirmative choice that the customer made. So how do you, like, let's just say that you get enrollment requests from the CCA and a supplier on the same day. How are you going to treat that?
So subject to check with the county, I would think that a supplier ad trumps the CCA ad for the reasons you just articulated, Leah.
Yeah, I would think. Yeah, I agree.
Okay,
Jeff,
so not necessarily like
last in rules as today.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I missed that last piece, Valerie. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, I think it would follow the same last in rules as existing today. So whichever one comes in last would follow.
Well, that's sort of my point, right? Because I mean, that, I'm sort of saying
So
last in shouldn't count. Yeah, it seems like that would not be able to hold.
Yeah.
Because I agree with what Jeff said. So,
yeah, and I mean, we'd have to talk to IT about how to manage that if that's what we agree to. I don't.
Yeah, I think we need to resolve the IT issues. We also need to satisfy the county. We've assumed that the CCA is going to be using a licensed retail supplier or multiple licensed retail suppliers. And so we'll have to work out to the satisfaction of that supplier or those suppliers, the county, the utility systems, and anybody else who wants to be part of the conversation, I guess, how to make it work. But I think the intent is to have the customer's choice of a retail supplier other than the CCA prevail, but that might not be something that happens instantaneously because of the last in rule. So we're just going to have to noodle that. But that's a variation on a problem that we already have, which is that we sometimes get ads from two suppliers for the same customer. So we'll just sort it out, and we will try to sort it out in a way that gets to the right outcome for the customer, but doesn't involve spending millions of dollars redesigning everybody's systems.
If folks don't have any more questions on that last topic, can I ask about how seamless move's going to work with this? I think in the scenario one, that's where you're talking about seamless move. So if you have a customer that is within Montgomery County and already has the CCA, they move to another location within the county, they'll keep the CCA just like they'd keep any other retail account. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
And if they move within the county, and again, within the same service territory within the county, and they have SOS, they will not be defaulted to the CCA because presumably this is post-transition and they've already made that initial selection to stay on SOS. So in that particular instance, the SOS will remain in place and will not be, you won't populate the FTP site with that particular customer.
That is correct until we get an ad from either a retail supplier or the CCA, in which case the customer would switch at that time.
Okay, but I guess what I'm saying, it won't really even be possible because so you're going to populate this customer, like the CCA customer list. Is this going to be a daily population? So like when the customer calls you up to say, I'm moving, you'll immediately put that customer on that list. So the CCA will have access to that, including the date of the transition. Is that will be like a same day or next day kind of thing? Do you know?
The frequency with which we populate or repopulate the FTP is one of the things that we're going to work out with the county and the CCA.
Okay. And has the county developed a preference for the timing of that?
Oh,
sorry, Stan, could you say that again?
no, we haven't. I think I would agree with Jeff. That's something we need to talk about. I'm not sure what the ramifications are of making different decisions. So we just need to understand that a little better.
Okay. So that could be daily, or that could be weekly, or that could be bi-weekly, or some other length of time, depending on how long the county or how often the county wants the utility to sort of populate that. All right. So for the purposes of the seamless move, it looks like that's not going to create, there's no interference with that. Like if you're on the CCA, you will keep the CCA. If if it's a seamless move, and by that, it's a seamless move if it's within the same county, or sorry, within the same service territory for all three of the utilities. And the seamless move has to be provided with more than 1 day of notification, right? So if you're moving on Friday, for it to be seamless, you have to inform the utility. Is it Thursday, the way that works? I'm not sure. I know all of the seamless move rules that have been agreed to. Is that correct? So like Thursday notification, I guess before like business closes, will allow you to seamless move as of Friday, or does it take more time than that? Valerie, it looks like
Yeah, for Potomac Edison, it's usually a 1 day. We need a day's notice. We don't do anything same day.
Okay, so in those instances where it's same day, a seamless move won't work. So if you're seamless for anything, you'll just end up on SOS, even if it's the same day. And then the seamless move doesn't require any action from the retail supplier other than to receive the 814 move transaction, which just informs.
We are going to follow the seamless move procedures.
I don't know what those are, Jeff. So I'm just trying to understand how this works.
Well, okay, but do we really need to spend time doing that on this call?
Well, I was trying to understand if there was another sort of condition in there that we had to figure out if the CCA doesn't seamless move with enough time. So I want to understand. I'm trying to understand just generally the timeline of how long customers will be on standard offer service with an eye towards seeing and trying to understand if is there a way to minimize that time or to actually make it zero based on what is being proposed. So without and maybe I certainly would be very happy to have like a more detailed, like step-by-step like mechanism of how the switching is going to occur, and that might eliminate a lot of the questions. So I can certainly wait for that, and that might eliminate some of those. But I was just going to ask a bunch of questions about how that process would work, so I could sort of develop an understanding of that.
So Phil, if they're on a seamless move transfer, then they would not be on SOS at all. The supplier goes with them as of the effective date, as long as the customer meets the requirements.
Right. And so that's a 1-day notice from what I understand.
Correct.
And that's
so they can't call today and say, I want a seamless move. I mean, it wouldn't work.
Okay. So if a customer, forgets and they call you up and say, hey, I just moved in, they're just
Then
going to get
they wouldn't even have the option of being on a seamless move.
So they'd have to
do the whole process all over again. Correct. Yeah.
So if you don't provide notice, you actually have to call your supplier and get enrolled.
Correct.
Okay. So potentially the way to exit your supply contract is to
Call today.
It's call the day you move.
Yep.
I understand. All right. So that I maybe need to think about how that impacts the way this works. Maybe it doesn't.
So can I just clarify something I think you said in talking about seamless moves? I think the way we laid out this process, that applies if the customer is moving within the county and within the same service territory. I thought you said moving to the county within the same service territory, but if they're moving from outside the county into the county, that wouldn't be a seamless move because they'd be a new CCA customer, basically.
No, if it's in the state of Maryland, so either PG County or Montgomery County. If they go from PG County to Montgomery County with a supplier and they're eligible, that supplier will go with them to Montgomery County.
Yeah, and that's not what we're proposing here because
that's the way it works. I mean, that's Maryland seamless moves.
Okay, I understand that, but that was developed prior to the CCA, and they're now a new customer in Montgomery County,
but seamless move is exempt from the CCA.
I thought seamless moves was exempt from the CCA as well. I mean,
correct. Yeah,
that's just being implemented now, and the whole point of it. Well, we don't have to have a debate about it, I guess, but that was my understanding as well.
It is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how it can be what it is if the CCA wasn't in the discussion.
This is the customer's request to carry that supplier with them from one location to another location in Maryland.
I understand. All I'm saying is that the seamless moves process, unless I'm mistaken, didn't contemplate the existence of a CCA.
No, but they have a third-party supplier already, so they wouldn't even be on any list to the CCA.
Right. They've already made their affirmative election to be with a supplier. I mean, that's one of the exemptions for being put into the CCA from the start. So if I'm shopping today and the CCA starts, I mean, I don't think that's any different than a current circumstance for somebody who's shopping. I don't think.
Yeah, I think it is because at the time they made a choice between SOS and a third-party supplier, now with the existence of a CCA, moving into a territory that has a CCA, they've got a third choice that they
So-
should have the opportunity to consider.
Stan, can I ask you a question then? Because you have, whatever, thousands of customers today that are in Montgomery County that are shopping. The CCA did not exist. My choices at the time were SOS and a supplier, and I chose the supplier. So are you suggesting that everyone shopping today should automatically go into the CCA? Because I think it's the same, it's really the same idea.
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. And I'm not suggesting that someone moving from from Prince George's Pepco territory in Prince George's County, for example, to Montgomery County in Pepco territory wouldn't keep their retail supplier. I'm just saying they would be put on the FTP site so that we would know that we have a customer to communicate with, and we would tell them, you have chosen a retail supplier. You will stay on the retail supplier, but here are your other options. And
I thought we already had this discussion.
Yeah.
That's problematic from the supplier community's perspective, I would say.
Yes, definitely from AOA as well.
Yeah, that's problematic.
well, that's the way I'm interpreting what the.
Part of the issue though is, we've already determined that the statute allows the county to communicate with every single customer, whether they're shopping or not. And so you already have that ability, right? Despite our concerns about that causing enormous customer confusion, to have the county marketing to customers and potentially getting them to abrogate contracts that exist today. I think that's already there. It's the law, so we have that. I think beyond that, though, having these customers who are on a seamless move into the county, but stay within Pepco service territory, for example, to then be put on the FTP site where those are going to be accounts you will enroll, right? So that that's a very different, a very different issue.
I think that's incorrect what you said. They put on the FTP site, the CCA gets the information, sees that they're in a retail supplier, and the EDI transaction to the utility is they're on a retail supplier. Leave them on the retail supplier.
Okay, so then I think that's different than what I think you were saying. So in that situation, the seamless move would still exist and they would still seamlessly move with their supplier. You're just going to get a heads up that, oh, there's someone new to communicate with, but it's not going to cancel or somehow, remove the seamless move. So maybe we're saying the same thing. You're worried about being able to communicate with them. I'm worried about having to go out and spend money to re-enroll them when they've been able to seamlessly move with me. You know what I'm saying? I think it's a distinction, maybe that's the distinction. So you're not actually suggesting that the seamless move be rejected.
Yeah, and well, again, it depends on what you talk about seamless moves. My understanding is under scenario 1 of the proposal here, the CCA was not even informed of this activity of someone moving from Pepco Prince George's to Pepco Montgomery. And what I'm saying is we need to be informed of that activity because this could be a customer that wants to be in the CCA. And so that, again, if they've chosen a retail supplier, the default under the law would be they're on the retail supplier. And we would have the conversation with them and say, you're on a retail supplier, you'll stay there, but here are your other options. But it wouldn't be a seamless moves the way I understand the process, because we would have information that there is in fact a new customer. And under scenario 1, my understanding is we would not even know, the CCA would not even know that move took place. Because the assumption is that person was a customer in Montgomery County, they got information about the CCA, and then they moved someplace else in Montgomery County. And so they did affirmatively make the choice once already. They don't need to make it again.
Stan, are you just saying you just want to be, the county's position is that when a new customer moves into the county, you want to be informed of that using the same method that you would be informed if it was a new customer or if the customer was seamlessly moving from within. So every time a new account is established in Montgomery County, you would like the information about that customer to be populated on the list that the utility will make available to you on the FTP site. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's consistent with the statute.
Okay, was there an objection to doing that from anyone else? I mean, it's information. You would not be permitted to switch that customer without their, if they were a customer with an existing retail contract, which would not have been broken by the move as it would be under kind of the way things work now, because of the seamless move, you would not be deemed to have their permission for you to act as the aggregator, but you would like to be able to be notified so that you could contact them. So is there anyone who's objecting to the county being made aware that a new account has been established at a residence within the county, as long as the county understands that they do not have permission to acquire that customer without the customer, affirmatively doing something? Is the objection that the county knows, or the objection that the county might act to enroll that customer without contacting the customer first?
And Phil, I think our I'll say inability to switch them off a retail supplier is also consistent with the statute, which says if they've made a choice for a retail supplier, they stay on the retail supplier. And so the CCA has to honor that provision of the statute. So I agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
Potomac Edison has no objection.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, Phil, the way you just described it, I mean, the issue with the county being made aware that there's a new resident, and being able to communicate, I mean, that's no different than, any supplier marketing to any customer, right? That's not the same thing as collecting affirmative consent to actually switch them. So I think I agree with I might have gotten your ones and your first example and second scenario mixed up right now, but I mean, it's not an objection to the communication. It's an objection to abrogating my contracts that the customer, executed with me. That would be our objection.
Agreed.
And I never, that was not what I said. So you misunderstood what I said. What Phil said is exactly what I said.
Right. So at the end of the day, we're honoring seamless moves. The county just gets the right to know who these folks are and can communicate with them. But the seamless move is prevailing.
They stay on the retail contract.
So we'll have to maybe write the regulations in a way that sort of captures that interpretation. But the question I have, because we understand that a seamless move has to be notified day of. In the instance where the customer does not provide the seamless move notification, so they call up and say, hey, I just moved in here today, that contract will be broken, and those customers will be placed on the list, but they will not be shown as a customer with a retail choice contract, because at that point they won't have one. So the CCA will be free to enroll that customer or not. And how are they going to know if they can't?
They will be, because they're not a seamless move customer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
Correct.
Well, this is Valerie. Can I just jump in on that? If they call the same day they move in, we actually aren't going to do the move in anyway. We're going to push them to the next day. So they really technically are seamless. We don't do anything same day. So I think we might have a difference between the utilities on how we manage that.
Okay.
If I understand that scenario you just provided.
I think Robbie told us a couple times ago that you can call same day and get new service.
That's for PHI, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in Potomac Edison, we don't do anything same day. Our system requires a next day service.
Okay, so this won't be a condition that PE has to worry about, because assuming the folks call the day they move in, it'll be effective the next day, and that'll act like a seamless move. So you don't really have any sort of seamless move delay conditions for PE.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think so.
Because you can't actually switch until the day after notification is provided. So that's just between you and the previous tenant, or the landlord for that matter. Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to be clear. We're a little different there. Thank you.
Okay.
David Hoppick has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Dave.
So, yeah, on the FTP, if a customer has a retail supplier, is that part of the information that's going to be given to the county through this website? Because it also kind of, below the bullet about that, and then it says CCA will submit enrollment via EDI and identify opt-out customers. So are they identifying opt-out customers by data given to them through the FTP? Is that how they're going to know that somebody moved into Montgomery County with a seamless move supplier?
I hope that's the case, yes.
Let me just, Dave, I think did you just ask whether or not the county's going to know if there's a retail choice, and they just, once they see that, they will not enroll that customer?
Yeah, that's part of my question, but also, are they going to be told through this FTP website? So we've already established they're going to get whatever information they need to enroll the customer account, etc. But is there also going to be something in there where it says this customer has an existing retail choice contract, such that they know it allows them to scrub and they don't attempt to submit an enrollment for the customer with an existing retail choice contract without, as Leah explained, a process by which they affirmatively choose the CCA?
Okay, I don't know that we actually got the answer as to what is on that list, if it actually includes the customer account number that's needed to enroll or not.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah, then
because we
I'll-
haven't figured that out yet.
Okay, so if they do get the customer account number on that list, then the CCA will have to scrub that list to make sure that they don't inadvertently enroll a customer that has a retail choice contract. If they don't get the customer account number that allows them to enroll, then they will need to contact the customer, get their account number from them, and then send the enrollment, just like any retail supplier would. So we sort of need to know that detail, I guess, before we can understand how the timing of this is going to work. But one other potential twist to that might be that if the account number is being provided, there's nothing to prevent the CCA from enrolling a customer and sort of taking a retail choice contract, which I know is an issue for, maybe that's why Kevin has his hand up. But is it also possible that a third option would be that the utility will not provide an account number for a customer that's seamlessly moving, or a customer that is otherwise already contracted for with a retail supply contract? So that actually can't happen. Then that puts the scrubbing on the utility and not on the CCA, but it may eliminate a problem. Without defer to Kevin, I said maybe that's what you're going to ask about.
Yeah, Phil, I think that kind of got like, and again, this gets back to, I think our thought was, if we're not going to, if we're not going after people who are under contract to, because of issues that might cause, again, however we decide, whether it's not that they're ineligible or that it's not what the intent of the CCA is, then, that list that goes over would not include those accounts. It would strictly be for those, the universe would be all SOS customers, and then scrub down from that is all SOS customers who opted out of the CCA. I mean, that becomes the universe of who gets enrolled in the CCA. So that eliminates a lot of potential issues with, anyone's account numbers being, inadvertently, pushed over, and now you're, could be some significant headaches if any sort of mistake is made, and you've now inadvertently terminated supply contracts for for accounts, and what does that mean with their supplier, and how does that impact the liquidated damages, termination penalties, we get down a whole path just because someone in an Excel spreadsheet grabbed the wrong list. So that would be our concern, obviously.
I agree with that.
I said, so utility folks and maybe the county, you could think about like who's the best entity to sort of protect against the inadvertent switching, such that if there's a list provided of the new accounts established, maybe I don't, and this is I'll ask this question to Stan in a second, but maybe if the information is not provided that allows the switching, which I think is simply the account number. If you don't have an account number, or in the case of BG&E, a retail choice ID, you cannot enroll a customer, or if you try to enroll with anything other than the correct number, it gets thrown out somehow. But if it's all of the accounts don't receive the account number, that means that the CCA would actually have to reach out and contact each new account that's being established. Stan, I don't expect that that's what the county wanted, but I just want to confirm that you have the expectation that if you get a valid eligible customer that's not on a retail choice account, then that they're on SOS, you're going to enroll them, or do you expect to contact each account to confirm that they want to stay in the CCA before you enroll them?
No, we would expect to enroll those that aren't on a retail contract in the CCA. Then if the customer subsequently contacts us and says, no, we want to be in SOS, or we found a retail contractor, there would be another EDI transaction to the utility saying, enroll this customer according to their wishes.
Okay, so if a customer has opted out in Montgomery County and they're on SOS, that won't get picked up as a seamless move. And so they'll have to opt out again under that circumstance, if what I've heard.
Say that again, I'm not sure.
So if you have a customer that's on SOS in Montgomery County and they seamless move from one Montgomery County location to another, say within the same service territory, they have already opted out of the CCA. They're going to have to opt out again after they learn they're on the CCA.
No, if they're within the way our scenario here, that they would be under scenario one. They're in the county, they're in the same utility territory. They would seamlessly move. They would stay with whatever they have. The assumption
If they're on SOS, you're going to automatically enroll them because they don't have a retail choice contract.
No, not under this scenario one that we've laid out here, because the assumption is they've made the choice to be on SOS because they're within the county. We knew they were a customer in the county. They got communicated about their options. They chose SOS. And so they would be subject to the scenario one seamless move.
How will you know that? Is that because you will keep that record, or is it because the utility is going to make a flag on their account that indicates they opted out of the CCA?
Well, our assumption is they are, because they're in SOS, that they opted out, because otherwise they'd be in the CCA.
Okay, but when a new customer account is established, the utility then will have to distinguish just whether or not that new location is created as a result of a brand new application or as a result of a seamless move.
I think this entire conversation is an excellent illustration of why we did not try last week to fully design the FTP, because these are all good third level issues that we will want to think about. The county will want to think about, the utilities will want to think about, and we will want input from the stakeholders on when we get to that stage.
Okay. I guess we sort of have to do this now so that we can figure out, like this becomes a task for the near term. It's not something we can really stretch out, which is that, how do the folks, I guess, from the county and from the utilities think about like this? Because it seems to me that we sort of need to get all this stuff banged out before we can move forward with, say, rules or something.
So we need to design we need to choose all the fields for the FTP now before we can do anything else in the work group and before we can, for example, start writing regulations.
Okay. Maybe if your folks want to think about like how long that, or next steps you want to do to sort of flesh out not only the information that's on the website and that gets transferred, but some of the permutations of how the various types of transfers. We just maybe need to get into the mechanism a little bit. But there's a couple of other higher level things I want to maybe touch back on before we move off of this. But there may be some other questions that folks have about the mechanism or things they want to bring up that we should probably catch before we go to something further. So are there any other hands up or any other questions about what's been proposed? Okay, I don't see any hands, so somebody let me know. Jeff, your folks and Robbie, are you kind of running things for the PHI Exelon folks? And then Stan, do you guys have plans to meet again to sort of dive into some more details, or how would we go about kind of thinking about where things go next?
Assuming our proposal is accepted as the working proposal going forward, yeah, we can get together further and go to deeper levels and more detail whenever it's deemed appropriate and necessary to do that. I mean, I think that kind of folds into the other question that was posed for today's agenda, which is where are we in terms of the work group's work and what's coming next?
Yeah, it certainly does. But what I wanted to maybe make sure I understood it, I guess I think we might need a little bit more detail on how these things are going to work and how they're going to affect the way the program rolls out before we can, before I'd be comfortable stating that this particular approach is what we would support. But ultimately, if the county is happy with this and the utilities are indicating that this is the low cost or no cost option, then maybe it sounds like this is a good investment of time to flesh out the details. But what I wanted to ask about sort of comes back to what Bill Fields had registered at the beginning. Not so much of the intermittent risk of adding a few thousand customers to SOS each month and then taking them back off. But one of the things that we understand about the way CCAs have rolled out in other places is that when there develops a significant difference between pricing of the polar service or the standard offer service and the CCA, and then customers become aware of that, it creates a fairly high risk of migration back to the lowest cost. And we have not, as part of the development of this, or anything we've done thus far, put any protections in place for migration risk for the rest of the SOS customers. For example, the Prince George's County customers, or maybe it's not a risk at all for BG&E because it's the small numbers, and maybe not a real big risk for PE. But in PEPCO in particular, if customers, and it sounds like they may be looking at, their first bill is going to come in, they're going to see different rates on it. I think we recognize this is a risk that we're going to see on the transition. Although it sounds like we're sort of transitioning on meter read dates, so maybe it doesn't happen at the first batch in October of 24. But if customers, when they move in or if they seamless move or they're seeing, that SOS is cheaper for whatever reason, we might be sort of building in some unexpected migration risk because the customers will see that initial bill. And we don't have any protection for that. I think it's known that it's a known occurrence that when customers see that big differential in price, a lot of them are going to switch. So if we're taking this approach, I want to make sure that we've properly reviewed that risk and made whatever adjustments to the SOS process so that we don't develop a sort of a steady switch back to SOS if this is something that actually ends up being an unexpected risk. So I kind of want to just raise that issue here because that I think would be the thing that would maybe make us more concerned about the amount of switching backwards that we would see, and whether or not the implementation of like the post-transition switching becomes an issue we have to worry about. So I think we're going to sort of take all this in and maybe come back with some thoughts on how that might work. But I do want to raise that here because in looking at this, it does appear to be a workable implementation. It's very similar to what we understand is being done in Ohio. It's kind of the sweep effect or the sweep method that we've seen. It still creates a situation where the retail supplier or the portfolio person that's managing the CCA is getting frequent new accounts coming into the system, whereas some of like in Ohio they explained that this is done, it's a quarterly sweep, so they sort of have a couple of weeks or months to see the number of customers that they're going to have to take on. I don't think that's and Stan, you can certainly let us know if you've thought about whether or not you want this to be more of a daily or weekly sweep, or if it's something that a quarterly sweep would be more consistent with what you can get a good price to do. But if we're going to move in this direction, this is I think very similar to our option 3 that we had proposed, and it does come with some downside that we want to make sure we've addressed and understand how it's going to impact in particular migration risk. So I'm not sure if it's enough to tip the scales one way or the other in terms of what we would recommend, but if we are going down this road as a means primarily of minimizing the utilities cost that has to be recovered from somewhere, I would want to make sure that this issue is highlighted now so that we can make sure we properly account for it, aren't surprised at some point in the future if migration starts to happen when we didn't think it would.
Phil, I don't think I have enough information to answer some of the questions you're asking, but it seems to me with respect to migration risk, that's present no matter what scenario we utilize. And what we were trying to do here was minimize the cost and effort of the utilities and therefore the cost that would be borne by the CCA. But the migration risk is ever present.
I think that it's true there, but I think it is also known that in many cases, customers don't really act if they don't. Most people don't really pay a whole lot of attention to what they're paying for certain things in some instances. But when it's highlighted to them, like, for example, by seeing 2 different rates on their bill, they might be encouraged to take action or to do something that they might otherwise not have done. And so it might increase the likelihood that they're going to move solely based on price.
Yeah, and I guess again, I don't know all the issues that may play in here, but so number one, that makes it puts the burden on the CCA to make sure we're offering competitive prices, and number 2, I forgot what number 2 was, but there was a number 2 there that I'll think of.
Yeah, no, and that's fine too, but it's not just the CCA that's risky here. It's
I understand.
It's the other
Yeah.
the other customers on SOS.
Yeah.
If migration occurs and we've altered our SOS bid process,
Yeah.
To not expect that to happen. I mean, there are folks have already mentioned the increment decrement function that can kind of trigger there, but that has an effect of impacting prices for all of the standard offer service customers at once, not just the ones in Montgomery County.
Sure.
So I don't, maybe this becomes a part of a discussion that happens when the PIP process examines what's to be done about managing the bid process for the customers or for the companies affected. But I just want to make sure that we're thinking about those things, because it seems that this may have a slightly higher risk of migration than a situation where customers are put on the SO or not put on SOS at all, and they only have the CCA from day one.
Yeah, and so just a couple things. One, I mean, we've always been pretty clear about our principle that it's not our desire to negatively impact customers in Prince George's County or choose to stay on SOS. So that's a basic principle, and it's hard to anticipate what those impacts might be. The second thing I would say is, to us, this option, as I understand it, at least, and again, I don't have all the information from the utilities, but the last time we met, there were some costs thrown around that were pretty big and would be passed on to the aggregation program, as I understand it, which would potentially, and if those options costly, might prevent someone from seeing two rates on their bill, but it cost the CCA cost to be higher. I'm not sure that's good, consumer protection, and I don't think we'd want that. So I think we need to be fair to customers both in the CCA and outside the CCA, and let them know what their options are and choices and prices. And
are you talking about the discussion of cost that was floated last time, or is the utilities provided you with?
No, the discussion of cost. I mean, there was $5 million from one utility and $1 million from another, and so the assumption was, there's going to be $6 million or something that somehow would have to be factored into the cost of the CCA, which would, drive up those prices that the CCA would have. And the fact that customers aren't paying attention because they might not have two different rates on their bill, but they might have a higher CCA bill, to me doesn't seem to be in the best interest of our customers, our residents. So, we certainly wouldn't want that.
Well, I guess that, that's sort of your call there, but it may be difficult to make a decision that's that pivotal without having more specifics on what actual costs would be developed, how much of them would be recoverable through a mechanism that would impact the CCA cost recovery, and then the level of allocations, that sort of thing. So it might be a little bit scary to see a big number like that, but it's also, after things get broken down to actual costs and time periods over which recovery occurs and allocations, it might be important to understand specifically how much is going to be impacted, because this is the type of thing that I think we've read some things that seem to indicate that there are significant risk of migrations if customers are given information that is telling them simply to switch based on cost. So,
of course, several 100,000 customers are going to have that information more than likely at the initiation of the CCA.
Right, but I think what is understood about SOS is that there is a value to being the incumbent and the default supplier, and that for years customers didn't shop even though they could have saved a penny here and there because it was too much trouble to go about doing that. So I thought that was one of the reasons for making the CCA the default supplier, rather than simply using the models that like the other states that do CCAs have, in which it was always an option, but they would opt into it rather than opt out of it. So, but I don't want to belabor. I wanted to raise that because I think that for us is something that seems to be sort of intricately connected to the decision-making process as to how to manage this implementation process. The other thing that we don't have to get into, but I know that there is some continued discussion of how retail choice will function potentially with an instant connect kind of function, leveraging whatever functionality is being constructed to manage the seamless move process. And I wanted to make sure that we understood how that's going to roll out before we make decisions here that sort of foreclose any options that look like that. So that's I just wanted to raise it. So that's kind of where we want to go on that. So any other questions or I see David Hoppett. Do you have a question, Dave?
Yeah, so, and maybe this can be added to kind of the things that need to be thought through, but in the prior meeting, some of the utilities, specifically the Exelon utilities, were pretty focused on the situation where the customer calls up to ask for new service, maybe moving into the service territory, and specifically says, I want SOS on that initial phone call. Has that been considered? I mean, you're starting on SOS here. Are there thoughts on that?
Well, I can tell you what Potomac Edison's thoughts were, but if you want to hear the thoughts of the Exelon companies as opposed to PEs, I'll defer. You tell me what you want.
Well, I'd love to hear PE and Exelon.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I'm talking, so I'll just keep talking. We believe that this approach eliminates that issue. The question of whether and when, from a utility perspective, it eliminates the issue. The question of whether and when and how a customer gets onto the CCA is entirely between the customer and the CCA. We just do what we do now, which is put people, we schedule the start of their service, schedule them to start on SOS, and then we wait until we get an ad from somebody. And if they're going to stay on SOS, we never get an ad. If they're going to switch to a supplier, we get an ad from that supplier. And here we would get an ad from the CCA. And it's entirely between the CCA and the customer how all of that happens, when and how and if. So from our perspective, that concern that you're right, we talked about in prior meetings, it goes away. And it also eliminates the concern that some people articulated about how the utilities potentially putting their thumb on the scale and trying to persuade people not to sign up for the CCA. Because all of the communications are between the CCA and the customer, and we're not involved at all.
Can Exelon weigh in as well, please?
Yeah, I wasn't on the last call, but for PHI, when a customer calls in to start a new service, we do not provide options to them. We just place them on SOS automatically. And then, like Jeff said, we wait for the enrollment to come in from the supplier if the customer chooses a third-party supplier.
And this is Ashish Mehta from BG&E. I apologize, I joined late, but our process is similar to PHI.
Okay, so to follow up on that, my understanding of how this is going to work with the delays that we talked about earlier is new customer moves into Montgomery County. Let's say they're in BG service territory. The data is posted to the FTP, about 3 days later, if the county immediately or their supplier immediately enrolls, they'll be enrolled in the CCA. So if a customer calls up to get that new service and for whatever reason says ahead of time, hey, I know about the CCA, I don't want it, I want SOS. Because that was a specific scenario given last call, if I recall correctly. The reaction is just going to be, well, you're already on SOS. Or what is the reaction going to be?
So, yeah, we talked about that. Potomac Edison talked about that with the county, and that's information that the customer has expressed that preference is presumably some sort of the kind of information that we would need or want to capture for the county in the FTP, and it's one of the reasons why we haven't designed the FTP all the way down to the last grid box yet. But the county is going to be the one that acts on that information.
Do the Exelon utilities have the same approach?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that we haven't really talked about the timing of when this customer list is going to get populated and put out onto whatever FTP site, right, for the county to get, right? We haven't, again, I joined late, so I apologize if that's been discussed, but it just depends on the timing of, you know, when that list is updated and when the county is able to download it and make that contact with the customer to let him know what his choices are.
All right, thank you.
All right. So, Jeff, do you guys, I guess, you know, based on the discussion, would it be possible for the utilities in Montgomery County maybe to go a little bit further forward and flesh out some of the details? In addition to some of the questions that we kind of talked about here, I think maybe if you delve into some of the descriptions of how things are going to work, including maybe a little bit more about, I don't know that everyone is familiar with the way the seamless move process is going to apply, but it looks like there was one or two things in there we need to sort of cover. What about costs? Have you, as part of kind of thinking through where this is now, is this something that would be done with no cost or a low cost? And in terms of comparison with, say, the other options that we discussed, in particular the staff's primary option that we were talking about up till last week, is there a way we can, you know, kind of decide to go forward with cost information available so we can kind of see, you know, what that looks like, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the allocation of the cost recovery process, so that when we make a decision to go forward, we're doing so with the ability to sort of compare the impact on the cost of the CCA against some of the other risks, like, you know, issues about migration.
So, Phil, the utilities and the county can certainly have further discussions between now and the next meeting, or over the course of the next several weeks, if we want to space this out over several meetings. And it would be useful if people who have questions they want answered articulated those questions in writing for us, so that we're answering them based on our meetings, as opposed to trying to do it on the fly. And with respect to cost estimates, because that's what we are talking about, is estimates for things that we would be doing in the future, and that haven't been built yet. We can certainly develop those with respect to this straw man. My understanding is that there is a very minimal cost associated with creating the FTP and the communication of the FTP. It's I don't know that it's zero, but it's pretty darn low, as long as we don't build something that has to then interact with a bunch of other systems, or that doesn't require a lot of manual intervention. But we can develop that, and I would put that question, or if it's a series of questions, give us the series of questions, and we can pursue that. We're always able. I was going to say happy, but that would be egregiously wrong. We are always able to deal with the homework assignments that we get between meetings, as long as those assignments are clear.
All right, so so you were looking for maybe some specific questions to answer as a means of kind of developing more of the mechanics of how this would work, in terms of the timing and that sort of thing. I think we probably can get you some of those things pretty quickly. Trying to understand it. So Jeff, it almost sounds like the way this is being proposed, aside from developing a means to inform the county of when new customers are arriving, and incorporating that within a sort of your customer list function that I guess is pre-existing from what was developed for retail choice, that this effectively is not going to require much at all. This particular option, it's really not going to require any sort of changes to the existing retail choice systems. It sounds like you're basically just going to let the county know when a new customer account has been established, give them some of the information they would need to either enroll or to at least contact the customer to enroll, and then they'll just follow the kind of existing process. So it's really like a no impact, or no, other than developing the customer list function that you're talking about. That's really the only change. This does not appear to have a system, like a retail choice system change at all.
That was our intent. That was the express purpose for pursuing this concept, and we hope that we have largely succeeded. Yes.
Okay.
I'm not going to say that there's no change, and I'm not going to say that there's no cost, but we tried to be minimal with respect to both.
Right. The costs are not at all involving. Just to clarify, I think what you just said was that the costs are associated with developing the list development rather than any change to the way new accounts are created or to the way accounts are otherwise enrolled in retail choice. Like any retail customer, any retail provider would be able to they wouldn't, unless you provided the list to all retail suppliers on your website as part of developing this function. But basically the county will be functioning as would any retail supplier with no specific functional changes to the system. And I don't know.
What I just said is what I just said, which is that we tried to design it to change things as little as possible. And I stand by that. And you're saying that there are no changes, and my saying as little as possible are different things.
Okay. If there are, maybe that's something that we can delve into a little bit further, but it seems like there aren't any from what you've heard. But we'll obviously need to look at that a little bit. If there are changes, or if there are no changes, I think maybe it simplifies the development of rules that have to be written in order to enable the pilot. So that might be another positive. For Ashish or for Robbie, when your folks are looking at this, are you coming to a similar conclusion that or have you identified that there are any changes to the retail choice aside from the provision of a sort of a revised type of customer list?
No, same as PE.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the only maybe nuance in this is how we manage the opt-outs, right? And I wasn't here for that portion of the discussion, so I'm not sure where we landed.
Okay, well, I think we can probably, when we get a little more detail on sort of the different steps, I think, there's probably like 5 or 6 different ways a customer can end up on the CCA based on some of the other models we have. So we can maybe look at each one of those as well. All right, great. Are there any other questions or comments? Lori has your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Phil. I don't know if your question was just about the discussion we've been having, but I think Lily Hawkins raised a question about sort of where are we on the list of issues we are trying to tackle prior to you beginning to write the regulations, or in order to write the regulations, and are there any new issues that should be added to the list? So maybe that was already on your agenda for the day, but I just wanted to make sure that we touched on that.
Yeah. Well, I think that was what we were gonna try to catch up everybody on at the end of on the back end of the call. If we sort of established where we're going with the enrollment process. Okay, well, we can go to that. I probably need to share a screen. I think Lily's on the call. I think what she had sent an email around that at least I think went to everyone was I think it was our framework document that we had put together probably back in the fall. And so Dave and I took that and added some notes to it. So I think what we can go through is walk through that document and talk about where we think we have agreement on things and where we have issues that we are still working on. And I need to figure out how to share a screen.
You should maybe have a button. It's a square with an arrow pointing up at the bottom.
Yep, there it is. Okay, let me try it. Host disabled participant screen sharing. See, Judge, can you turn something on?
I didn't disable a thing, but let me, I'm gonna make you the host.
Oh boy. I hope my CPU can handle it.
Can you do it now?
Yep, now I got it. Okay.
There was also somebody waiting to get back in. You might have to let them back in.
Yeah, I just clicked admit that. So. All right. I'm going to share screen 1 here. All right, can everybody see this document? This is, oh, that's not the right screen. Hang on, let me bring it up. Here's the general framework. Okay, can everybody see?
Yes, we can see
the document says draft framework for implementation of CCA at the top.
Yes.
Okay.
It might be good to zoom in once or twice.
Yeah, let me try and where's my zoom button. Let's go 100% and all right, so that's, everybody can see that pretty well?
Yes.
Okay, and is Lily on the call? This, I believe, is the document she sent around, and this is where she had some questions.
Yeah, I'm on the call. Thanks for addressing this. Generally just wanted to kind of have a check-in on how things are progressing and see if there's anything we need that we've already discussed that we need to circle back on, or issues we want to make sure to leave time for, or new things that needed to be added.
Okay, all right. Well, so what we've got up top here, so this was, we circulated, wow, it's back in October. So general parameters from the legislation. So items 1 through 8, and I'll just go through this entire list. These are, I think, just things that we're listing as requirements of the legislation. Where we have comments here over on the side. So we had a number of simplifying assumptions that we were talking about, and I think we have identified that these are things that basically the first one was something that there was agreement on. The second one, like 10 and 11. So 10 addressed the issues related to the billing process using utility consolidated billing, and so we have not yet kind of written up anything, but I think generally we had a straw man for that pretty much everyone agreed to, you know, and generally, and there's probably some implementation issues that are in there. 11 was the simplifying assumption addressing enrollment. We are working on sort of the transition enrollment, or I think we got through the issue of managing the transition of you know, at the start of in October of 24, and what we're sort of talking about now is the post transfer enrollment. So you know, the ongoing enrollment process. So I think we are working on enrollment now. We have a general agreement about how the transition is going to work and when it will occur, and we're also 13 is something that we're working on. And I can't see hands at this point. So Judge, if you would let me know if somebody raises their hands. Something happens when you share your screen, you lose the gallery view. So 14 and 15 were just elements of the legislation that we were stating. So basically, I think all we've got here is that we talked about billing, we talked about enrollment, and we'll go into a little bit further about when we're gonna, we've agreed on when the CCA is going to start and how we're dealing with SOS. So I will keep moving through this.
You have no hands right now.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so the issues related to ownership and generation, 16 through 20 are just some statements. I don't think we've had anything to do in particular there. Key issues near term. So we talked about managing SOS, number 21. So we basically have agreed on the start date for the CCA will be October of 24. And the commission has heard and accepted that the PIP process will be making some changes to manage the SOS and bid process to make sure that it lines up properly with when the load's taken over by the CCA. 23, 24, and 25. 23 and 24 are relating to information that's provided based on enrollment. I think 23 has general agreement. There's probably some details about what gets provided when in that initial information that's provided to the CCA so they can inform the customers. We talked about that as part of the straw man for the transition. 24, I think is also, I'm going to lump those two together because they're essentially addressing what the utility provides to the CCA. And then 25, we have not yet, I think we recognize that this is something we need to deal with. We have not talked about how any uncollected costs related to, in this case, pre-existing SOS uncollected costs would be allocated to the CCA, but we have talked about there is a need to do that, and but that's not something we've dealt with just yet. All right. And moving on further. So generally at this point, we've dealt with the immediate needs for the SOS bid process, and we've talked about utility consolidated billing for the CCA, and we're in the process of dealing with the enrollment This issue here is one of the things we have to do next after we sort out the enrollment issues, is that there is an application that the CCA needs to provide to the commission, and the commission has to approve it. That has to happen, I believe, well, it can happen as early, it's going to happen whenever it is put together and is brought to the commission, but based on our general agreement with the start date of October of 2024, we sort of need to have the county provide its application to the commission so that the commission can approve it very close to the end of 2023 or the very beginning of 2024. So one of the next things we need to do after we sort out this enrollment process is we will need to figure out what the county has to put together in terms of providing to the commission its aggregation plan. So all this stuff here that's highlighted, this is things that are laid out in the legislation. So I think our sort of next task step, there's two that I think are going to pop up. One is going to be development of regulations needed to lay out, in this particular instance, the customer protections associated with the enrollment and billing. And then we were going to need to put together, and also the enrollment billing operations process, but I think it all ends up being similar to the sections of the COMAR that currently address those issues, which are in one of the customer protection sections. And then we need to develop the CCA application process and make sure that's something that the county can get in front of the commission in time to meet our October of 24 deadline. So that's kind of the back half of this document, and we have not yet sort of worked that out, but that is, I think, one of our next key tasks to work out. And the rest of these are just elements that were part of the legislations. These are not specific things we are working on at the moment. So I think, and we talked a little bit about this last time. I think we had hoped to have enrollment worked out by now. It still looks like we're going to have a couple more weeks dealing with that, and we will need to be maybe taking a close look at our schedule to make sure we are, not running out of time. But one of the things we're going to work on next is putting together something, and we're going to need to work with the county on this to develop what the application to the commission is going to look like. There's a number of examples that are out there. I think we've recently had the opportunity to have some discussions with the folks in Ohio, and they pointed us at a couple of those applications. And that is probably something that we want to start working on pretty early. And then simultaneously or concurrently, we're probably going to want to start figuring out how we're going to make changes to the existing COMAR or create like a new subtitle within or chapter or perhaps within COMAR to address the operations and customer protections for the pilot. So that's, I think, where we stand at the moment. Lily, does that catch you up on what you were looking for? And was there something additional that folks wanted to put on the menu in the near term?
Thank you. That's helpful. And apologies if the document I sent wasn't the correct one. I was trying to look for something that had sort of the high level overview of the work that's on the table before us. And that was the most recent document that I've been able to find.
Okay. Yeah, that was the framing. There may have been some other stuff we used to form things up, but I think we were just sort of looking at what made sense to follow the development of the enrollment, sort of business enrollment and billing business plans. I mean, there will be a need to take a look at what's going on with the SOS PIP process, but I think the folks that deal with SOS don't necessarily. We'll probably want to keep track of what's happening there, but I don't think we have to devote work group time for that. So I think our game plan was work on the application and then get and start framing up where the regulations would go to handle what we've talked about thus far. And I see Lori's hand up.
Just wanted to check and make sure we didn't have any loose ends on the customer notification pieces. The law requires two notifications. I know AOBA raised issues about not wanting to receive the second notification. And I feel like there was some question as to what was the legal requirement of the county. Did we resolve that?
So I don't know that we have done anything more than have that discussion, although I think that is one of the things that we'll probably have to lay out as part of the regulations that we're going to use to sort of guide this. My understanding, and we talked a little bit about this today, is that it had been raised by AOBA that they were looking for a way to prevent customers that are their clients in particular who have a pre-existing retail choice relationship, to prevent them from inadvertently being enrolled or being given the opportunity to enroll because the person receiving like the billing information for the account might not actually be the entity that's responsible for making that type of contracting selection. So they were looking for sort of ways to manage that. I don't think we drilled all the way into that yet. So I know that we sort of talked about how to manage that, but part of figuring out how to solve that got into what information was being provided to the utility or to the CCA by the utility for the purpose of having the utility, or allow the CCA to reach out to all of the residents, or I guess all the account holders for the residential and small commercial accounts within Montgomery County. So I don't think we have the specifics on that yet. I think we've established that there was a time period when we wanted to send that, and that there were issues about making sure that information was sent in a timely manner and on a sequence that allowed it to be sort of reacted to properly. So I think we talked about sending lists very early on in the process, because there's a requirement for notice to go to all of the county accounts, the residential and small commercial accounts, when the CCA is being formed, sort of informing them of that process, which I think is also there so that they can participate in that process if they have a desire to do so, I guess, at the commission. And then there's the notification that goes out, and I think we talked about August 1st or somewhere thereabouts of 2024 in order to allow the opt-out process to occur. And the detail that we didn't necessarily get into at this point was whether or not enrollment information in terms of the account would be presented to the utility at that point. So I think that's probably also something that we would sort of nail that down when we laid out the rules for how that was going to be established. So there's still some things to be sort of nailed down, but I think we've talked about it and we understand just generally where folks' positions are on it.
Thank you. I was just curious whether there had been any determination by lawyers as to what the county's obligation on that second notification was, and whether, as AOBA had requested, it could be waived. My sense was it couldn't be waived. It was a legal requirement, but it sounds like that's a discussion for another day.
I think drilling into it a little bit further, it had to do with whether the notice is one thing, and then the notice accompanied by an account number that allowed you to enroll a customer is another thing. So, and I think we have moved to general agreement that the county is going to scrub that list to make sure that they don't enroll the wrong customers, but that there was a desire expressed by AOBA to make sure that that scrubbing was effective and that none of their accounts were inadvertently enrolled anyway. So I think that particular, like solving that problem in terms of how the information is provided was something that we needed to deal with. But when I think push comes to shove, if there's disagreements about that, we'll probably have to take that out of the rulemaking. Well, that's-
So in addition to us producing some draft regs for the commission, we'll also be submitting to the commission a report. And when we'll be noting when there's something outside of a general consensus, and folks will have an opportunity to weigh in at that point, should we not be able to reach a general consensus on some items. The other thing I wanted to mention is that our latest schedule that went out was November 30th, and it went November 30th to March 1st. In that schedule, we made assumptions based on how many meetings we were going to need in order to get to through our first subjects for consideration. And we estimated at that time that enrollment we'd be done with that on February 15th, and we're still working on that. And then implementation was next. So that's where we're going. But on that, if I have that document, if anybody needs it, but on that document, staff did a really good job of reserving a bunch of other issues that we need to talk about later on. So that's a good path for where we're going. It's granted, it's not been updated because we're still kind of stuck in the subjects in the order that we determined they needed to be decided, but I'm sure we'll update that sometime soon.
Judge, we can bring that up to at the next meeting and go over that if that's what we need to cover.
I've had several questions about that, so that might be a good thing to do,
Yeah.
Bill, if you don't mind.
And maybe we'll even try even better. We'll try to update things a little bit and try to take a couple of guesses of how long it will take to get through the enrollment issues. I do want to make sure that we're not like running out of time somewhere. I think we had lots of time, but we are, we're maybe using a meeting or two beyond what we thought for the enrollment, which, I think there's enough slack in the schedule, but we'll check that out and make sure it works.
Haha, lots of time. That's funny. I personally feel the pressure because we've got to get the regs to the commission. It's going to fly by. So, but yeah, I think that's a good plan going forward.
Yep. Okay. So, are there any other questions or comments? I think we've established that there are a lot of interest in this. In the approach that the utilities and the county drafted up, but that we need a little bit more sort of detail on how that's going to play out. It looks like it is a very low cost option, so that's a good thing. Oh, Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, so on the feedback that Jeff earlier asked for in writing, do we want to set timelines for that?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Jeff, do you have a feel for when you'll be able to meet with the county again? Have you guys talked at all about next steps? Like before?
We have not, and we would set up a meeting for as soon as reasonably possible after we got questions. So if we get questions in the next couple days, we could try to have a meeting this week. Otherwise, it would be next week.
All right. Well, I think we can get you what staff's got. Probably I think we'll want to talk amongst ourselves tomorrow. So we'll get you those maybe COB Thursday if you guys want to try and meet either Friday or Monday. And then if you have, I don't know how long after your meeting you might want to sort of resolve some of those questions or turn things back around for when's our next meeting on the 2 weeks out is which date? Take a look at the calendar. So if
April 12th.
Our next is on the 12th. Okay. So I think staff can get you stuff by COB Thursday earlier if we can. And then maybe you could turn around something by the end of next week with some additional details on it on the 8th. Does that work?
We will give you on the 8th, whatever we have developed between getting your questions and the 8th. And we will meet as soon as we're able to after we get the questions.
Great.
And so if there are people other than staff who have questions, not that I enjoy answering what amount to be data requests, but it's better to get the questions in advance and when people have the leisure to think about how they want to word the questions than to try to do it on the fly in the meeting. Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about in the meeting too, but the having written questions works better than not. So if other people have questions about this proposal, the joint, I'm not going to call it a joint utility and county proposal, although I hope by the time we get to the next iteration of this, it will be a joint utility and county proposal. Right now, it's Potomac Edison in the county.
Jeff, to that end, I think BGE and PA or PEPCO would like to be included in any additional conversations.
That was my plan, Bev. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And that was part of what I was hoping would lead to the next time we all get together and talking. What we'll be talking about is a Montgomery County and all the utilities together proposal, as opposed to one that is just two of the stakeholders.
All right, that sounds good. Dave Hoppick, is your hand still up or did you have another question?
No, I need to take that.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, unless there's anything else, Judge Grace, it looks like that concludes our discussion for today.
I didn't thank Potomac Edison and Montgomery County for this proposal. It's wonderful, and you can tell you put a lot of work into it. We needed a good working straw man for this, I guess, and so thank you so much for all of your work and for all the work that you're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks.
You're very welcome, Your Honor, and I really want to thank the county because they took our concepts, and a lot of the words were words that the county came up with, and then we were very happy with them. So it really was a joint effort, and I look forward to folding in the contributions of the Exelon companies as well for the next iteration of it.
Does anyone else have any business that we need to take care of today? Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Hey, guys, we're going to be on Zoom from now on. We're switching over to Zoom. I don't love it, but that's what we're doing. So hopefully this time deleting the WebEx link so it won't be in your calendars. Hopefully that worked today. If not, we're going to be on Zoom from now on. So we'll see you here in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Your Honor.